How to set up card art using Shader Graph and Unity. Here's the anatomy of my card in Soul Food. Today we're going to be looking at card type. I'm going to show you how to use Shader Graph to develop your card type, as well as your card base. So what you're going to need are these three components for setting up your card. The mask is optional, but I like to use it when my card art sort of overflows outside of the card, like this cat, or this zombie, or this werewolf holding on to a doggy bag. So join me as we move on to Unity and create our shader using Shader Graph. First things first, we are going to change this from opaque to transparent. That way, we expose the alpha property in our shader. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to create some variables such as texture 2D, going to name this one card base. We're also going to make another one, call this one card type, and one more for as the listed card mask. Now that we have our properties, let's make our sample texture 2D. I hit right click, create node, and I'm typing in sample texture 2D. Once we have our sample texture 2D, we are going to fill in this texture using the property that we created, which was the card type. So I'm going to drag the card type, and then I'm going to connect it into the texture. While I have my card type selected, on the top right here, I'm going to fill it in with the burger, which is going to be my card type for this video. I do plan on moving my card type, so we'll do that using the UVs. To set this up, I'm going to right click and do a tiling and offset. So I'm going to create node, tiling and offset, and I'm going to connect this to UVs. You'll notice that when I move the offset, I am now controlling the position of my card type. The next thing we're going to do is we need to create the mask. So I'm going to move this to the side, hit right click, create node, and make another sample texture 2D. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to drag this over and attach this, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did before with the card type, which is to select this and use my mask that I mentioned earlier as well. And now we have our mask and type. I'm going to highlight this and hit Ctrl G to group it, call it card type. And now we're going to create that card base by using a new sample texture 2D. I'm going to get the last property that we haven't used, which is the card base, drag that in, connect it, and apply the card base onto it as we've done before. Now we have to connect all three. So how do we do that? The next thing we're going to use is a lerp node. Now this is a node I use all the time. The lerp is perfect for putting on your base, as you see here, with something on top, which is our type. And then we use our sample texture mask as the alpha, the T option. Great, now we have the type on top of the card base, but we have that white background from the original card type. You'll see that the mask is working, but we still have this issue because we need to use the alpha from the card type. So we're going to do this again. We're going to make another lerp. I duplicated that with Ctrl D, and I'm going to set this not as the A, but as the B option because we want it to be on top. We want the card base to be behind, so that's going to be our A, and then we're going to use the alpha from here, link that here, and now we have our amazing card that we can move up and down, and you'll see it is staying inside the mask, which is exactly what we wanted no matter which direction we move it in. Perfect. Now this is ready to go into Unity. The last thing that I'm going to do is for organization purposes, I am going to group all of this by selecting my top cards here. I'm going to hit Ctrl G and type in card base. And now I'm going to add this last node into my base color. And here in our preview, I'm going to right click, set this as quad so that we can accurately see what the card is going to look like. Perfect. Oh wait, last thing. We do need to set up the alpha, and we drag the alpha from our base card, and there we have it. Now we have a nice clean alpha behind our card. So this is perfect and ready to go into Unity. Now back in Unity, after saving my card shader graph, I'm going to look for my shader graph, right click, and set up a new material. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see it in action. So I'm going to right click here, go to the object, sprites, and set up a square. And I can't see it, so I'm going to click and hit F, which will zoom us in. Now I'm going to add this, drag it on here, and there we go. We see our card. If I open this up, I'll have the option to be able to switch any card type that I want. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe with the subscribe button below, and please sign up for the newsletter for more updates coming soon. Before I end the video, I did want to go over a couple of tips and tricks to explain why I did certain things the way I did. When I click on my card, you may have noticed there is some spacing around the card. There is a reason why it is not cropped like this image here. You'll see also that my burger has a lot of space around it and is also not cropped like this image. There is a reason for that. The first of the two reasons is the file size. The file size makes a huge difference depending on how you export your image. If you look into Unity, Unity wants the files certain ways. If I click here, you'll see that this is how Unity wants their files. I have mine set to, as you can tell, 512 by 512. This is for the reason in that it compresses it based on what they call the power of 2. So you'll see that it's a much lower kilobyte compared to if I were to select the other one that is cropped and not in the power of 2, not 512 by 512, that it has a 0.8 megabytes. That is a difference when it starts to add up with all the different card types as well as card bases that you have and everything that goes on top of the card. The second reason for the burger is, let me set up this sprite, and I'm going to add in the shader that we created earlier, which is the tutorial one. And you'll see here that if I open this up and I drag in the burger that is cropped, it's got a crazy scale. It's scaling it incorrectly, not how we want. And you can see why when we open up the shader. On the shader here, if I do replace our original card type with the one that I mentioned, which is the crop burger, so I'm going to change it right here, card type, selecting the cropped burger, which burger size. All right, and you'll see that it tries to fit the sample texture 2D. But is there anything we can do to try to make it work with this? Well, sure, we can move the offsets by scaling it here. As you can see, I'm trying to get an accurate scale depending based on the card art that I did create, trying to position it accurately. But you're gonna have to do this for all your cards if you're not happy with it, and maybe make a shader for each one. And then you also see that there are streaks, black and white streaks coming up and down the card because you're changing the UVs on it. But I would like to note that most cards, they use a full image that doesn't have any alpha, so this situation would most likely work for them. But for me, since I do have an alpha, I am getting these weird streaks, and it just doesn't work for me in my case. It was just better to create the card type on top of the card base and then import that with the spacing using 512 by 512. And that's it for this video. I will see you on the next one.